Good evening from Tajikistan. So in this class we're learning and discussing how a society, a culture, or even a market segment can affect the evolution of a particular technology. This idea of social construction, that a group of people can affect the evolution of a technology, is an interesting concept when compared to the common thought that technology evolves based on needs, wants, or practicality, maybe even functionality. The technology that I'd like to discuss is global positioning systems technology, GPS, and how that technology's evolution has been affected by various groups of people throughout its lifespan. I use the words evolve and evolution frequently because I think it describes the changes that occur to a technology as it moves through its life cycle very well. While at a micro level, these changes may appear to be hard shifts in its design, application, and/or its functionality, but when you look at the technology as a whole, these collective changes are much more transformative as they reflect changes based on the demand signature of customers and the problems the tech seeks to resolve. With its origins beginning in the 1960s, GPS technology was originally used to solve the problem of how to effectively track U.S. Navy subs that were carrying nuclear weapons throughout the ocean. At that time, there were only 6 navigational satellites, and if the submarine had good line of sight with these satellites, it could plot its position in just a few minutes. This seems like a huge jump to our current personal understanding of GPS, where I can open up an app on my phone and know my exact location within seconds. But in the 1970s, to meet the need of the Department of Defense to maintain a reliable satellite navigation system, the DoD took lessons learned from the Navy scientists and launched its first of 24 Navstar satellites. This was in 1978, and then by 1993, ironically the year I graduated high school, the system became operational. Now the GPS is owned by the U.S. government and operated by the U.S. Air Force. It serves the needs of national defense, homeland security, civil infrastructure, and commercial use in science. This technology started out with a need: track the submarines out in the ocean. A bunch of scientists got together, they did science and nerd stuff, and invented GPS. Technologically speaking, the concepts behind GPS are not that difficult. Mixing electrical engineering, geometry, and a fair bit of math, but nothing that really vexed the scientists. So how did this technology go from being a very practical piece of government hardware to being an integral part of daily life for many people? Camping and outdoor adventure in general. For many years, the GPS tech was primarily a piece of military hardware, and later it was shared with commercial air travel. But at one point, someone got into their heads that they could market a personal version of a satellite navigation device and sell them. In 1989, Magellan did this by marketing the first handheld GPS device in the U.S. It's called the Magellan Nav 1000. By the late 90s and early 2000s, many companies such as Garmin and TomTom were selling portable navigation devices to the public. For the most part, these devices were used by hikers and adventurists, as well as a growing enthusiast group called geocaching, sort of the technologically based scavenger hunt hobby. People were starting to realize the technology, but it had limited reach because it appeared to have limited scope or use. This was until everybody's favorite tech, the smartphone, began carrying the onboard ability to do the same thing as a GPS device, and that was navigate. I ran across a 2009 article by the New York Times with the headline, "Sending GPS Devices the Way of the Tape Deck," in which the author discussed this new ability by smartphone users to navigate with just their phones. Someone had taken the same technology that the outdoor enthusiast had loved and marketed it literally to anybody with a car, and then later remarketed it again, making it available on smartphones. All along the way, this tech was evolving based on inputs and feedback from different groups. For many years, the primary consumer of this technology was the military, and so its evolution was highly dependent on the needs of the consumer. It was eventually made available to the commercial air travel industry and later marine navigation by the Reagan administration to ensure future commercial travel safety. So its technological innovation again was redirected. At one point, fearing vulnerability to our assets, the government intentionally degraded the accuracy level of the GPS systems for all non-military and ally users. Later in 2000, the government removed this degradation of the system, making it immediately about 10 times more accurate just overnight. The government effect is an easy one, though. We understand how that works, but who else has influenced the design and application of this tech? Dog owners. albeit a very small niche. You can go out now and buy a small geolocating device for Fido that attaches to their collar and allows you to locate your lost dog via your smartphone. Relatively inexpensive and developed in order to meet a specific problem. What about uses that serve nearly no purpose and yet were accepted in a huge way by the general population of smartphone users as a whole? It's right, it's the pet rock of the digital age, Pokemon Go. This GPS-enabled game app changed the way people used their phones, played games, interacted with their surroundings. Sure, someone walked off a cliff or walked into traffic, excuse me, but they weren't watching where they were going, and that is beside the point. These have been a couple examples of how people individually or collectively use this technology, but what about the ways in which the technology affects human relationships? One thing that's very popular these days is the way in which we love our social media. Everyone is on social media. My mom is on social media. People always want to know what they're doing, who they're doing with it, and where they are doing it. Geotagging, made functional in part by GPS, is very popular and has some interesting side effects that can both positively and negatively affect human relationships. I remember quite a while back, maybe 10 years ago, a friend and I had both gotten new phones. They were almost the same phone, and we got them at about the same time, completely by coincidence. But I remember this friend remarking about how he had it set up to interact with his wife's phone to give her an idea of where he was throughout his day. He was a police officer that worked about an hour away from where they lived, and it provided his wife an expectation on when he might be home. Now, that's a positive example. In more recent history, I've read several stories involving infidelity in which a man or a woman are found out by their significant other to be cheating or in some other way behaving in a way contrary to the expectations of the significant other. Often these realizations are brought to light because of our good friends Mr. Social Media and his buddy GPS. Well, this is not the fault of the technology, either that of the GPS or those technologies that use it, such as the smartphone or the social media platform. These human relationships can be drastically affected one way or another by its use. In my previous story about my friend and his wife, they used it as a tool to create efficiency in their day-to-day life and manage expectations. In the latter example, these people had neither the common sense to reduce their digital signatures through a few simple keystrokes, nor the foresight to understand how people always find out. Regardless, we've seen how we've seen how technology can take on its own evolution through the actions of collective groups of people, whether they're users, developers, marketers, to end up with new innovations that were never originally perceived, as well as improvements on original designs.